For those of you who know me, know that I've watched a lot of anime in my life. In 2008 2009, I really peaked, and I watched hundreds, if not thousands, of shows available while I was working overnight security. Now, with that, I kind of burnt out of anime, and over the last couple of years, I've watched them here and there, but nothing really has piqued my interest, barring like Dragon Ball Super and the manga. But over the last couple of weeks, I have been told about a show that I should give a shot to. I've asked my audience and a few of my mods, hey, I want to get back into anime. What's a show that I should try and watch? And this show was a recurring theme, and then I finally said, you know what, I'm going to watch it. That show being Japan Sinks 2020. I had posted that I was going to watch it, and I had also been asked if I could do a review for the show. So it kind of made me a little bit more dedicated to watching the entire show. But of course, going in, I was a little bit skeptical because I wasn't sure if I was even going to still be really into anime or really be interested in watching an anime. But Netflix has never steered me wrong in terms of anime. Knights of Sidonia was excellent, and it's also where I found Noragami. I know they didn't make Noragami, but it's where I was interested in seeing it, and I'm still anxiously waiting season 3 of Noragami. But without further ado, here's my review for Japan Sinks 2020. Now, before we get into this review, I want to give a special shout out to Shiroi Kodo for this actual death counter of the anime. Link will be in the description down below. 21k subscribers, so I'm sure you guys are pretty well aware if you're into anime about this channel. This was the best summary of the show that I could find, so shout out to Shiroi. And all credits go to Shiroi for the video. I'm just using it because it's literally the perfect backdrop for me reviewing this show. Now, Japan Sinks is literally living up to its name. It's a show about calamity and destruction caused by natural disasters, being earthquake, volcano eruption, and more. So there is a level of severity that goes into it, and it's also like hyper severity, all based upon the premise of Japan sinking, starting with Okinawa. Now, there's several different characters go into the show. As you can see, the show does get pretty grim, and we're pretty early on. There's already 17 kills. Some of these kills are a little bit more heart-pully than others, and I'll talk about this a little bit later on, but let me tell you, Netflix does a really good job capturing the whole grim aspect of the show and really pulling you into these characters. Japan Sinks does a really good job in making it seem like these characters are a lot more important in the long scheme than the short amount of time that they actually get on the television. As you see here with the dad trying to catch his warthog to feed the family. Ultimately, you think he's going to die here. He does not, and they're successful in getting the roast. But so now you're like, oh man, like his time to potentially die is probably past now. And they're starting to build this attachment to it. Well, now you're seeing the explosives, and you're like, oh my god. At this point, you're like, no, wait a minute. He's trying to dig for yams for his family, and there it is. Leftover bombs from World War II. And that is the end of the father. Early on, this show actually does have a lot of meaningful deaths. And you're like, holy shit, like, did they just really do that? That's fucked. Like, holy shit. And it was a really funny point after watching this episode where it was in between episodes and I heard, like, alarm sirens going on. And I was like, oh, this is the last thing I want to hear during this. But, like, this is another instance here where it was, like, another, like, really, like, unexpected, holy shit type death. But from this point on, I've noticed something about this show. The storytelling always remains, absolutely fantastic. The storytelling is always great in a show. However, there is a lot of inconsistencies, especially in terms of, like, the animation style. I get that they're trying to go for, like, an older animated style feel for it, but and sometimes it just gets really clunky and sloppy, and you can really see it in the hands, especially of Ayumu and the mom. Their hands just become giant towards the end of the series, and it kind of goes back and forth between the animation styles. It makes me wonder if there was different groups of people who were actually working on this product in terms of just, like, doing all the artwork and the animations. Because sometimes it's very fluid, most of the time it's not. This was another holy shit death when the child dies. You're like, oh man, it was unexpected. But what I feel Japan Sinks does great is its storytelling. What I feel like they don't do great is the level of predictability towards the end. It becomes very rushed and it becomes very inconsistent with the amount of like detail they go into the deaths and the depth that they go into the deaths. Just really like the dad, and even like the old man. Like the old man, like, oh man, like you know what's gonna happen. You know he's gonna ultimately sacrifice him, but you're like at this point you're like, oh man, I really like this guy because he's kind of like built up that level of empathy for him. You already know what's going on with like the whole morphine addiction and losing the granddaughter, and you know there's so much. And here we get this shark. This is why the anime is at a perfect 10. No, I'm kidding. It would be really hard for me to give this show a perfect 10 because of the inconsistencies, but this was a very good shark. I will say this shark's 10 out of 10. But you see when Ayumu covers her mouth, her hands are just massive. And this is the part of the show where like the animation style just becomes very, very 80s anime. Becomes very like old, fashion, and like, yeah, it's not the easiest thing to watch. You're kind of just like, wow, this is kind of ugly looking, and it's not the most eye capturing. And I get this. I get the whole premise is about the story and telling the story, but this is where everything starts kind of going downhill for me, to be honest. The first 6 episodes were very, very captivating and very great in terms of storytelling. And I'm trying to like do this review without doing any sort of spoilers, or like being too spoilery or being too in detail. But like at this point, you know the mom is gonna die. And at this point, there's also no reason for the mom to continue living besides the fact that they want to keep living, which is very obvious. The mom's got a heart condition, and her actual like monitor has failed, and there's no way for her to charge it now that Mount Fuji's exploded, and the clouds are covered in ash and overcast, so she can't charge her device anymore. So it's like, in terms of storytelling, her purpose has kind of been fulfilled. She at first didn't get along with Ayumu, and they kind of hashed that, and then she made the ultimate sacrifice as a mother to make sure that they were able to continue moving forward. Same thing here with Koda. It's kind of like you knew this was going to happen. You knew like when he was running back, like he was going to get washed away, and this is where it kind of becomes more and more predictable, and that's a shame. That's a big shame, as I'm going to pause Shiroi's video here, because it's coming to an end. Because like the show was so good, the show was so good, and it was captivating, and it was just doing a great job painting this image of grim storytelling and being like, wow, maybe this could really happen one day. And as you see on the screen, like, it's an anime about disasters. It's not an anime about zombie apocalypse or supernatural, anything like that. It's an anime about like stuff that could really happen. And then ultimately they kind of lose that, and that's, to me, it makes me sad because the show is going in such this great direction, and towards the end it just falls off cliff. It's kind of like 2019 going into 2020. And I know like there was a lot of kickback about this show, especially about like the fact that it desensitizes natural disaster and calamity. And I don't think it does that. I think in the beginning it does like paint like this picture of like, wow, this is a little bit hyper realistic, and it could also, potentially happen or never happen. But they lose that, and it hurts for me to do this. But between like the fact that it falls off a cliff in the storytelling, and also in quality of animation, and also the ending was kind of like lame. I'm not gonna lie. Ayumu becoming like Blade Runner, and like it just showing, oh, you will go through all this, you could overcome anything. But it says it's like what, 8 years after Japan sank, and like the prediction that it was once again going to re-rise a couple of years. But like when they show the progress that they've made in 8 years of like Japan partially resurfacing, it was like, wow, they would never be able to do that in that short amount of time. That's 6 years of them to develop, but it would never happen that quickly. One, you need resources, and two, you need like the financial stability to do so. You also need to like, they weren't like sitting there like, all right, the day that this island resurfaces, we're gonna jump on there and we're gonna start building. There would have to be some sort of period where you're just like, okay, we need to see if this is stable. We need to see what we can and can't build on it. We need to see if this island is even going to support this amount of weight, and also will other islands emerge in the near future that would be a better potential for us to build this type of architecture on. So to me, that was kind of weird and unrealistic. So it goes from being like hyper realistic to being like, wow, this is really like out of the ballpark. And because of that, I have to give the show a 7. This show is so good that I was watching it, and Kelly, who's not an anime fan, was like, hey, listen, don't finish this without me. I want to see how this plays out. And we watched the ending together, and even she was just like, not great. The ending is like very much like, oh, you could overcome anything and do it. But the first 6 episodes say, you're fucked. And I feel like the ending was rushed, and I feel like they potentially wanted to string this out over more seasons, but they kind of couldn't justify calling it Japan Sinks 2020 and then continuing it in later years. But I don't know. It hurts me to do it, but I can't give this anything better than a 7, and I'd even be leaning towards like a 6 or a 6.5. Great show, don't get me wrong, watch it. If you don't care about like the little nitpicky things like the animation styles, the predictability of the storytelling, or just like the overall theme, watch it. Give it a shot anyway, because you might love it more than I do. The score for it is great. I love the music in it. The characters are very relatable, and they build them up very well. But ultimately, towards the end, I feel like characters run out of their story plot usefulness, and also it becomes very stale in terms of storytelling, and you lose that like holy shit aspect of it, and that's a shame. But yeah, let me know what you guys think in the comment section down below. Again, thank you for Shiroi Kudo for making this video. Link in the description. Make sure you go check them out, and thank you guys for watching. I'll see you guys next time.